This is the Horse Radio Network.
This is episode 548 of Horse Tip Daily. A different horse tip, a different equine topic, a different equestrian expert every day. Horse Tip Daily brings the world of equine knowledge to you one day at a time. Today's tip is brought to you by ECOGOLD. Hi, Coach Jen here, and thanks for tuning in to Horse Tip Daily. Today's tip is from Dr. Narada Richards, a keen horsewoman and passionate scientist. First of all, Dr. Richards parlayed this passion into a doctorate degree in equine nutrition from University of New England. Then, in 2003, she founded Equalize Horse Nutrition Limited, which provides scientific and independent information to the horsemen and horsewomen worldwide through its online software, feedxl.com. Today's tip is about appetite, your horse's that is, maintaining it, fixing it, and why both are important. But first, a word from today's sponsor, ECOGOLD. ECOGOLD uses the latest developments in textile technology plus smart design to make the most advanced products on the market. For example, ECOGOLD's dressage, hunter, show jumping, and cross-country saddle pads are non-slip, 100% breathable, and hypoallergenic. They quickly evaporate moisture, reduce friction and pressure points, and absorb shock, yet still allow close contact. And why, you may ask? Because ECOGOLD doesn't have a one-type-fits-all mentality. Their textile engineering team looks at different issues affecting sport horses' comfort and performance and comes up with the best materials and design for each saddle pad. Improve your horse's comfort with ECOGOLD saddle pads. Ask for ECOGOLD saddle pads and protective boots by name at your local tack supplier or visit them online at ecogold.ca. Now, enjoy today's tip. And Dr. Narada Richards is here to tell us about something horse nutrition related, I am quite sure. What have you got for us?
Rightio. Well, today we are going to talk about keeping horses eating. So there's nothing more frustrating for a horse nutritionist than to put together a perfectly balanced diet and have a horse look at it and say, no, thank you very much, I don't feel like eating today. Because you may as well just tip it all on the ground and start again. But thankfully it doesn't happen all that often. But if a horse does stop eating, it's pretty important to figure out why he's stopped eating pretty quickly and get him back onto feed as soon as you can.
That's pretty essential for a horse, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you die if you don't eat.
Yeah. So. And sometimes in very short order.
Yeah. Well, in the short term, if they stop eating, then, they're at high risk of colic because their gut empties out. And then in the longer term, of course, if they don't eat for a very long time, then they're at risk of starving to death.
Yeah.
But I think, So the first thing to do when your horse stops eating is you've got to work out why it stopped eating. And sometimes that's really obvious, if your horse is injured and in pain or, stressed from an accident or something like that, then it's pretty obvious usually why they've stopped eating. But some things can be a little more subtle. So there's a list of things to go through.
I love lists. I'm ready.
Okay, so if the horse has got a disease, and things like gastric ulcers are an obvious one. So, if he's got really bad gastric ulcers and has stopped eating, he may have stopped eating completely or he may have stopped eating partially. If the horse is in pain, generally, yourself, if you're in quite severe pain, then you don't generally feel like eating all that much. One that we see a little bit in racehorses is a vitamin B1 deficiency. So B1 is needed to stimulate appetite, and there's a whole raft of studies that have shown in all these different animal species, including humans, that if we get B1 deficient, we actually lose our appetite.
Really? Didn't know that.
Yeah. So in horses, things that can cause B1 deficiency are some weeds like bracken fern and nardoo, rock ferns, horsetails. Plants like that have an enzyme called thiominase. And it destroys vitamin B1, which is also called thiamine. So if they're eating those weeds, they become B1 deficient because they never actually get a chance to absorb B1 because it gets destroyed in their gut. And if you're feeding horse uncooked grains, so things like, crushed corn or crushed barley, or wheat that hasn't been cooked, a lot of that starch in those grains will end up in the hindgut because the horse can't digest it in the small intestine. And when it gets to the hindgut, the bacteria that like to ferment starch ferment it really rapidly, and those bacteria also produce thiaminase. So you can have a B1 deficiency created when hindgut acidosis is present, which is what we see in racehorses.
Oh, it's starting to come together now. Okay.
So now the next one on the list is a mycotoxin poisoning. So if you get a hay or a chaff or grain that is contaminated with mould, and that mould has produced a mycotoxin, one of the really early symptoms of mycotoxin poisoning is a loss of appetite.
Huh. Didn't know that one either. This
Now
is good stuff here.
There's just simply a case of the feed doesn't taste good. So if you try to feed your horse something like either a feed that doesn't taste good because it's gone off or it's mouldy, or too salty, your horse won't eat it, obviously. And some horses just don't like some ingredients. We find probably two ingredients that you guys don't use a whole lot, but soybean meal and occasionally copra meal. Horses will they just don't like them. They just turn their noses up at them. And other horses will chew them down like they're the best thing ever. But if your horse stops eating, it's possible that it's just because it doesn't like the taste of its food. Another common thing that I see, and again, this is particularly in racehorses, is over-supplemented diets. So owners that throw in a little bit of this and a little bit of that and a bit more of this and a bit more of that, and you eventually end up with a feed that just tastes disgusting because it's got so much stuff in it.
Oh, yeah. Like, just try grinding up a one-a-day vitamin sometime and sprinkle it on top of your cereal and see how it tastes.
They're filthy things. They taste disgusting. So imagine having all of that added to your feed all the time. I'd probably stop eating as well.
Yeah.
Medications, if you're putting medication into your horse's feed, I know my horses, if I put bute anywhere near their feed, they will not touch it.
Yeah,
no matter how much
radar.
they like their feed, they will not touch it. And I probably don't blame them. And the last one is just stress. If the horse is stressed by changing routine or, he's away from home, missing his buddy, then quite often they just won't eat. And you see that a bit in competition horses when they go away from home, they just decide that they're going to stop eating.
Yeah.
So once you've identified the cause, and hopefully you can identify it, you then need to remove it or treat it. So, of course, in the case of disease and pain, work with your vet to work out what's causing or what the disease is or what's causing the pain and to treat it. And hopefully if that's what was causing the loss of appetite, your horse will start eating again. If it was a B1 deficiency that was being caused by weeds that contain thiaminase, of course, get them off the pasture or get the weed out of the pasture, and supplement them with vitamin B1 to treat that deficiency. Or if it was being caused by hindgut acidosis because you're pouring a whole lot of grain into this horse, either go to a high fibre grain-free diet or change to a cooked feed. So
what do you mean by a cooked feed?
Well, probably a little bit more common in Australia than they are in the US at the moment, but a cooked feed, like a steam, like if you were feeding whole barley, for example, you can boil your barley. Or you could use a steam flaked barley. We have extruded feed.
So like a whole grain. If you're feeding your horse whole oats, cook the oats, and okay, got it.
Oats is actually fine. Oats, for some reason, the structure of the starch in the oat grain is different to the structure of starch in the barley grain and the corn grain. So horses can actually, this is what I did my PhD on, but horses can actually digest the oats in starch quite easily. So you can feed, provided your horse chews them, you can feed whole oats or crushed oats without cooking oats, no problem at all. But once you start going to feeding barley and corn, or really any other cereal grain, so rice is in that category as well, they have to be cooked. And by cooked, I mean treated in some way that uses heat and water.
Interesting. Well, there you go.
So they can be micronized or extruded or expanded or steam flaked, steam rolled, pelleted. All of those processes cook grains. So if you are feeding uncooked grains, then you should switch to a cooked grain to take that pressure off the hindgut and stop the bacteria from producing that thiaminase.
Yeah, so you really do have to pay attention to not just what you see, and you have to look behind the scenes a little bit, because you could be really, the horse went off his feed, but it could have been a process that started 3 or 4 weeks ago that finally, today, the horse has finally gone off his feed. It might not be something that just happened yesterday.
Yep.
And one of the things that I see a lot, people dump the grain in the horse's feed bucket. This is one of my personal pet peeves. He doesn't eat it. Old Thunder normally eats his grain just fine. Pour it in there. Please clean your feed buckets.
Yep.
Because there are some horses that like there's a mouse in the bottom of it. Well, you don't notice. It's dark. It's 6 o'clock in the morning. You dump the grain on top of the mouse.
Yeah.
Thunder is likely to not eat his grain.
I wouldn't eat my food if someone served it with the mouse either.
Yeah. So pay attention to or there might be, if you keep your feed someplace where it's not really well sealed, there could be critters in there, and it's been contaminated by the critters themselves or what the critters leave behind. Yep. And maybe he eats his grain slower, or he tries to sift it a whole lot more than he used to. Keep that in mind, because obviously the ramifications of rodents are that's a very long list, which we won't go into. So don't discount that things might just need to be cleaned out and, as my mom used to say, GI'd.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, as usual, fascinating, interesting stuff, and some areas of appetite suppression I never knew about before. So I feel smarter. I'm going to have to get bigger headphones.
There's lots. Now, if it's mycotoxins, obviously try and isolate the source, and you can have your feeds tested, but generally if it's mycotoxin poisoning, you'll have started a new bale of hay or a new bag of feed, so generally you should be able to isolate where it came from, and if you can have it tested, all the better. Otherwise, just get rid of whatever the last feed was that came in before your horse lost his appetite, and see if that helps. With unpalatable feeds, find a feed that your horse likes. And if you're not sure which bit, like if you're mixing 3 or 4 things in the same bucket, what I say to people to do is do a couple of feeds where you actually put each component in a separate little feed bucket, and your horse will soon tell you which part he doesn't like, because that's the bit that he won't eat. Yeah. So, if you've got 4 things and you separate them out and feed them all separately, and he eats 3 and doesn't touch the 4th, don't feed that one. Find something that he likes to replace it. That's a pretty easy way. Now, over-supplementing, our advice is just use Feed XL to adjust your horse's diet so that you're only you're meeting their requirements, but you're not exceeding them and you're not over-supplementing them. And that way too, you also know things like salt, which will really quickly put a horse off their feed. You're only giving them as much salt as what they need in the diet. Medications is a simple one. Don't put it in their feed. If they won't eat it and you really need to get it into them, what I generally do is mix it up with apple sauce or molasses and stick it in a big clean syringe and just put it straight in their mouth. But if you do that, do it after you've fed them, because otherwise if you do it before, often they'll stop eating then as well. I think
good point. Yeah, if you do it before they feed, they're going to forget it. My whole mouth tastes disgusting.
Yeah, I mean, if I worm my horses, they refuse to take any sort of treat from me after I've wormed them. So it's the same with medication. It's like they chuck a little tantrum, go, no way, what you gave me last time tasted disgusting. I'm not trusting you anymore. And if it's stress, some horses won't eat unless their best buddy is right beside them. So if that's the case, stick their best buddy right beside them, because, having them eat is a priority. And for sick horses, there's a feed in Australia that I call horses chicken soup. It just tastes good. They love the stuff. It's kind of like I call it a light feed. But, if your horse is sick, just give it whatever it will eat. Because at that point in time, it's not really important what it eats. It's just important that it does eat. So just find something. And, if all it'll do is graze green grass, then let it graze green grass, unless, of course, it's a lemon-eating horse and grazing green grass is going to do it more harm than good. There's those stress lines for the lemon-eating people again. But, yeah, another really good tip is keep the diet simple. The simpler, the better.
So the more complicated it is, the more it can go wrong, I guess, eh?
Yeah, and the worse it can taste as well. And if you really get stuck for having your horse eat, then put some things in there that make it taste good. So bran is a good one. A lot of horses like the smell and the taste of bran. You can use honey, molasses, applesauce. You can grate carrots or apples. Some horses love the taste of brewer's yeast. And putting some alfalfa in it. I'm pretty sure you can get it, but we use a lot of chaff, which is just chopped up hay.
You can buy that here. They don't call it chaff, but it comes packaged and it's sold as chopped forage for horses, specifically for horses. It's very handy stuff, you're right.
So chopped alfalfa is often a good thing to put in their feed too, to help them eat up.
One that I've had great success with is anise or licorice extract.
Yep.
I've had a lot of horses that love that stuff, and there are a couple of horse treat brands that if you look at the small print on the back, that's what they're flavored with. The front of the package says apple, because that's what people like.
Right.
But when you look at the back of the package, what the horse tastes is anise.
Yeah, and I know a lot of horses that love licorice, so there must be something in that they do actually like the flavour.
I think if you look at the herbal books, it is considered an appetite stimulant. The flavor profile, I'm sure the herb is, but whatever. But the flavor profile is considered an appetite stimulant.
Yeah.
I guess just because horses love to eat it. But I've not come across a horse yet that turns his nose up at that flavor profile in the little treats. They love them. But they can't very well exist on treats. But that's just something to try sometime.
Well, if you're really desperate, and they'll eat treats.
It's 6 calories in there.
Yeah, that's right. For a 1,000-pound horse.
Yeah, there we go. Well, again, great stuff. Some really handy ideas in there, and some really smart ideas on what causes appetites to go away and how to help get them back. So thank you once again, Dr. Richards, for stopping by. And I have all sorts of clever taste profiles to try on my horse now.
That's right.
And I want to know what his favorite food is on the off chance someday in the future he gets sick and I need to feed him something he really, really likes. Yeah. I'm going to find out what that is now.
Yep. No, it's a good idea. I mean, it is a good idea to have that sort of in your back of your mind, because if they do get sick, or in the case of mares that foal and they go off their feed, sometimes it is really handy to know what that feed is for your horse, so you can go out and grab it.
There we go. Thanks again, and we'll be seeing you next time.
Pleasure. Thank you.
I always feel smarter after I have a conversation with Dr. Richards. To listen to all of Dr. Richards' tips, just go to horsetipdaily.com and go to the Experts drop-down menu on the left. You can also go to feedxl.com's newsletter section for more fantastic, free, unbiased information about equine nutrition. Please stop by the Horse Tip Daily Facebook page and let us know what you think of the tips you hear on the show. It's also a great place to tell us about topics you'd like to hear us cover. You can subscribe to all of the great shows on the Horse Radio Network through iTunes or Zune and get your horse podcasts automatically downloaded to your iPod, Zune, or MP3 player. I'll be back again tomorrow with another new expert and a different horse tip. Until then, go ride your horse! The Horse Radio Network and the Horse Radio Network hosts are not responsible for statements of guests or their opinions. Use your own judgment when listening to the tips provided by the experts on Horse Tip Daily.